What connection does the Space Shuttle Challenger and popcorn have to do with teaching your kids the importance of the first great commandment? We're going to talk about that today. Stay tuned.
If your desire is to become spiritually stronger, emotionally healthier, and relationally smarter, you're at the right place. Speaker and writer Stephanie Smith inspires and equips you to achieve these three key aims. If you're a parent, you also learn how to raise empowered kids, ready for adulthood. Let's get started.
In January of 1986, across the United States, thousands of teachers stopped their regular classes and directed millions of students towards the television screen. Several million adults paused their daily activities to tune into the live broadcast from Cape Canaveral, Florida. NASA's Space Shuttle Challenger was set to launch into space carrying 7 crew members, 5 astronauts, 1 payload specialist, and for the first time in history, a civilian, a social studies teacher from New Hampshire, a wife, a mother of 2 children, ages 9 and 6. Well, at launch, the rocket boosters and shuttle weighed over 4 million pounds and was constructed of thousands of parts. 4 of these pieces, known as O-rings, were about 38 inches in circumference and only about 1/4 of an inch thick, about the same thickness as an ordinary pencil. And the O-rings were designed, they were seals, and they were designed to keep the hot gases and flames inside the rocket boosters. But tragically, these seals failed, and escaping gases and flames burned a hole into the external fuel tank, triggering a massive explosion, tearing the space shuttle apart, and everyone aboard perished. Why did these O-rings fail? The very simple explanation is that the cold temperatures that day exceeded the O-rings' capacity to function properly. There were people that had warned against launching, said, no, we need to wait. These O-rings have not been designed to withstand these record-breaking cold temperatures. Now, the launch had already been delayed a couple of times before, but the people that were saying, no, we have to delay it again, they were ignored. You know, everyone and everything has limits, and ignoring these limits can result in deaths, not just of people, but relationships, opportunities, careers, effectiveness, abilities, and even health. You know, we've been talking for the last several episodes on Thursdays about how do we teach our kids to make the first and also the second, but right now we're just focusing on the first great commandment, the central focus of their life, not just in some theoretical abstract, I can quote that as a memory verse, but real life. To love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our mind, and with all our strength. And we've specifically been looking at capacities. And we've talked about our abilities. We've talked about our who capacities, having to do with who we are, primarily our character. And we've talked about our do capacities, how we actually show up in life and do stuff. But capacities have their limits as well. Now, in the opening, I mentioned popcorn. And so you might be wondering about, okay, what's the whole Space Shuttle Challenger have to do with popcorn, and how is this connected to the first great commandment? If you have ever popped popcorn, you know that you have to get it just at the right time. If you don't pop it long enough, what's going to happen is you're going to have some kernels that don't pop. And you just don't eat plain kernels of popcorn that haven't popped, which is really kind of fascinating because it's not like when you pop popcorn, it's not like you add any other ingredients. You just change the structure of that corn, and yet it's changed in such a way that it makes it much more digestible at that point for us. There's an interesting chemistry experiment for your kids. But also, if you leave it in a popcorn popper or microwave, or if you still do the old-fashioned way of heating oil up on the stove and cooking it that way, I don't know, does anybody even do that anymore? Probably, I'm sure somewhere, yes, people are still doing that, whether of necessity or just because they think it's cool. Then if you over pop it, then what you're going to end up with, you're going to end up with some burnt kernels, and you don't want to eat those. And it doesn't take a whole lot of extra time to go from unpopped to popped to burnt. Our capacities are like this. They're like bags of popcorn. And we can have self-limiting beliefs, which is the equivalent of not letting our popcorn pop long enough. And so there are unfulfilled possibilities because we have self-limiting beliefs. On the other end of that spectrum, what burns up our opportunities is pride. So we want to look for this balance between self-limiting beliefs that leaves us with unfulfilled potential and pride that can destroy our capacities. So how do we teach this to our kids? Well, the first thing that we obviously do is we have to model this in our own life. What we pass on is more what's caught than just what's taught. In terms of if we say one thing but we do another, well, it's pretty much what we are going to do. That's going to stick far more than what we say. So we want to have continuity both in what we say and in what we do. What protects our capacities is humility. And if only humility were this skill set that you could just sit down and teach. Like you can teach your kids their numbers or colors or how to read, or you can teach an older kid how to cook pancakes or change a tire on a car. And if only there was a curriculum that said, here today we are going to learn the virtue of humility. But that's not how character and development and spiritual growth and maturation work. If only that were the case, but it's not. So trying to make this a little bit more tangible without trying to become formulaic, one of the things that we can do is we can look again at the life of Saul. And in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 8 through 14, we read this tragic story of Saul. And I encourage you, read this with your kids. Have a family devotion over this. Talk about this passage. Have them listen to it in the audio version while you're going somewhere together in a car. It's not a very long passage, but it's a powerful passage. And what we see in here, Saul is now king, and he is facing this army of Philistines that's they've been battling back and forth. They do that throughout all of Saul's kingship. And he is scared. The men in his army are scared. And from a logistical standpoint, they have legitimate reason to be. They are outnumbered. They didn't have guns to them, but they were definitely outspeared and outsorted. Okay, I know technically that's not a word, but you get the idea. Their enemy had controlled the development of Israel's weapons. And so weapons that were produced had to be produced in secret. And as the Israelites made advancements against the Philistines in different battles, then they were able to take weapons that they were able to recover when they won a battle. But still, they were terribly outmanned and they were outweaponed. And so people are scared. And Saul, as the leader, as the commander-in-chief, sees his army becoming very scared. Now, Samuel the prophet had given Saul an order. And he had said, I want you to go to this place and I want you to wait for me. I will come and I will offer a sacrifice and I will ask for God's blessing as you go into this battle. This was something that Saul, as a prophet, was absolutely allowed to do according to the Old Testament law. Saul, even though he was king, was not allowed, according to the ceremonial and worship laws that God had instructed way back when, Saul was not allowed to offer these sacrifices. And Saul knows this. He's not operating in ignorance. But what does he do? He gets scared. And so he decides that he is going to overstep his bounds. He's not going to wait because Samuel's a little bit late showing up, and he goes ahead and he offers the sacrifice. And when Samuel shows up, he pronounces this judgment on Saul, which can seem a little bit like, really? What? And he says, you know what? Because you've done this, the kingship is not going to be passed down through the generations to your family. That's how serious God takes it when somebody steps into a position that is not theirs to take, when they overstep their bounds. Now, this isn't about us living in fear. And what we have seen in Saul's life is back when he was first going to be crowned king. Remember we talked about this in a previous episode? The people have to go and drag him out for his coronation because he's hiding behind baggage. But now he has moved to the other spectrum here where he's motivated by pride to say, hey, you know what? I'm king. Okay, we got to get this battle going. I don't want to wait. Samuel's late. I don't know. Maybe something's happened to him. There's probably a lot of different ways that Saul rationalized his decision to go ahead and step into an activity that was not his. At first, we see his self-limiting beliefs were at risk for keeping him from even being coronated king, even though God had said, you're the man. And then we see where pride steps in and he moves into something he's not supposed to do. We can have these two things in our life. It's very seldom that we only have self-limiting beliefs or we only have pride. Most of the time, we're going to be dealing with both of these in some area or another of our life. So how can we develop humility in our own lives, and how can we help to develop this in our children? Because it is humility that protects our capacities. I want to give you 3 things to focus on. Again, I wish there was some formula I could give you, just play, plug and play, and here, you're going to produce a kit of humility. But there are practices and principles, and then we can pray and we can say, God, show us how that we can uniquely adapt these to our lives and to our family and to each of our kids. So the first one is humility focuses on the right priority. Saul focused on fear. He saw the enemy's power and his army's perplexity. His focus became his immediate desire to rally his troops because he was afraid that they were all going to split and he wasn't going to be left with any kind of army at all. And so he focused on what he was wanting to do here rather than his long-term vision, which was, as a king, he was to lead his people in righteousness. He could trust God to bring his army back together, even if they all split. He needed to focus on the right priority. He doesn't do that. It's kind of the same thing that happened with the Space Shuttle Challenger. Some of the key individuals, they didn't focus on the right priority, which was the safety of the crew. There were a lot of other factors that went into that, but crew safety was not given top priority. And the result of that was disaster, just as a result for Saul was disaster as well. The other thing that humility does is humility waits for guidance. We saw this with Saul. He doesn't wait for Samuel. Yeah, Samuel's late, but he still doesn't wait. Isn't waiting kind of hard? I mean, whether it's because you've ordered a package and, you've got that 2-day shipping and you're counting not days, you're counting like the hours until it shows up, or it might be waiting for years for a spouse to come along. It might be waiting for years for a child to come back to God. I mean, waiting is hard, but humility waits. Doesn't mean that it makes it easy or fun, but it makes it a choice to wait. Just at a very practical level, you don't want to just make your kids wait on things unnecessarily or to try to artificially create humility. But at the same time, there is something to be said for having an appropriate times. Kids just can wait. And without fussing and without whining and without begging and without asking, for something 3 million times while they're waiting. But there is something about teaching kids how to wait on something, which actually is cultivating humility. Another thing that you can do, going back to the first point there, is focusing on the right priority, is talk to kids about priorities. Don't assume that they are always going to just understand what the right priority is to focus on. They're not adults yet. They're not grown-ups yet. And if we're honest, isn't it sometimes kind of hard for us to decide what's really the right priority? Sometimes it's pretty obvious and we just don't like it, but sometimes we don't really know. So have conversations about how do you identify priorities. Teach your kids how to do that by having those regular ongoing conversations. So what do you think the right thing to focus on? What do you think the best priority is right now? What do you think the top priority is in this situation? Is it reconciliation with your friend? Is it holding your friend accountable for something that they've done wrong? Is it making a decision about whether you need to even stay in this relationship and this friendship? Just get used to talking to them about priorities in all these situations and learning to wait. And the last thing that we see with humility is humility follows wise instructions. Some of the top brass and the NASA Space Shuttle program didn't follow wise instructions. They moved on, and the result of that was absolutely disastrous. Saul leans on his own understanding. He placed his opinion above God's command. He doesn't ask for help from those around him. I mean, Saul was king, but he was still a man. He could have talked to other people in his inner circle and said, you know what, I'm struggling with fear. I know I'm supposed to wait for Samuel. It's not my place to step in and to offer those sacrifices, but I'm scared right now. He could have leaned even on other people in a time of his own weakness and asked for their support. That's part of humility. You can't follow wise instructions if you don't ask for them or you don't seek them. So part of humility is gathering wise counsel. And that's something that we can do through other people, through podcasts, through books, through all different kinds of ways, primarily through reading the Bible and studying it. But God has revealed wisdom and knowledge generously in many ways. The Bibles we've talked about before, the North Star that's fixed, but also through common sense, through other people, and even in the way that all of creation works on a macro and a micro level. So pray for your children to recognize their own capacities. And then you as a parent, be intentional to develop those capacities, both their character, their who capacities, and their skill sets, their do capacities. We have this tendency to think in a very narrow framework in the United States as far as skill sets. And we tend to think of those in terms of career. What's my kid good at? What are they interested in? How can that be funneled into a career? But life is a whole lot bigger than a career. And also, people nowadays don't stick with the same field nearly as long as they used to. And that can be because we have a lot more choices. It can also be because things change at a much faster rate. And there are jobs that now that people have, and 10, 15, I don't know, maybe 5 years from now, they will be obsolete. That's just something that we see. So developing a wide perspective on your children's due capacities is one way that you can help to prepare them so they have the ability to love God with all of their strength and with a lot of different strengths, not just one or two. But in order to protect whatever capacities they have, they're going to need humility. Now, humility does not result from humiliation. Even though those words are very similar, they have no connection to one another, except humiliation is a great way to destroy humility. Humility is always based in respect. It is not about shame and humiliation. We saw here the damage that was done when Saul focused on fear and then on pride. And really the root of humiliation and shame is both fear and it's pride. So we want to stay away from those things. All right, my friend, that is going to wrap us up for today. We are going to continue to be looking at this, this first great commandment. How do we live this out? How do we teach this to our kids? And how do we develop this idea and this perspective? How do we help them to adopt this mindset that this is going to be the central focus of their life? So that's what we're going to be talking about for a while on the Thursday episodes. Hey, if you haven't already, go to the website, stephaniepresents.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter over there, High Impact. You're going to get links, not just to content that I have and things, but you're going to get links. Sometimes I have books on there for parents or for individuals. Sometimes I'm going to link to other podcasts. I'm going to link to articles. I'm going to try to acquaint you, not overwhelm you. I'm not going to give you 25 books every week you need to go buy or check out at your library. But I am going to try to connect you with other resources and people and organizations so that you can do this job as a parent well, and also as your own growth as an individual. Remember this, my friend, you have an impact that is immeasurable, eternal, and irreplaceable. See you next time.
Thank you for listening. Visit the website, stephaniepresents.com, and sign up for High Impact to join the mission of building spiritually strong, emotionally healthy, and relationally smart women and families. You can also book Stephanie to speak at your event and check out additional resources. Together, we can invite and equip generations to engage fully in God's grand story.